Welcome
Hello
to Mindfully Gay Podcasts with John Cottrell and Jerry Bowie.
We are here.
And we haven't recorded in a couple weeks.
We had a little break, but we're back on.
And then I think we had some sickness.
Yeah, I'm still kind of dealing with a little bit of stuff. So
it's good to be back and having the conversation. I just literally got back from Peru.
Yes.
2 days ago.
Yes.
And you've been to Peru many times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we landed on a topic for today.
Yeah.
Airline travel through Delta.
No. Exactly. It's just, it's crazy out there, people.
Coach is the only way to go. But I think one topic that came up at our last retreat that we visited was this notion of we, meaning gay, queer men,
right,
are the medicine.
We are the medicine.
We are the medicine.
Yeah.
And just came back from Peru, which was a 14-day journey into deep medicine work.
Right.
And we're going to talk about what medicine is.
Yeah.
But then we start kind of collaborating about how both of us in your yoga and meditation practices, what consciousness is, shamanistic practices, ceremony and ritual, even what we do with our clients and our coaching and therapeutic practices, and even the relevance, like, why is this kind of work important?
Right. Because I think there's certainly a curiosity about kind of, this medicine work. And I don't know, it's just somehow it's bubbling in the mainstream right now. And I think people are curious about, like, what is this? And like you said, what's the relevance? How does this help? What does it do? So I think there's a lot of questions out there. And it doesn't feel too foreign to us because we've been doing this for a long time, right? But I think it's just now getting into people's awareness of, because it's popping up in kind of ceremonial circles, certainly in kind of social circles, therapeutic circles. So it's kind of popping up. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about it, especially in the queer community, and how it can and is relevant in our community, and where to look for it and what it is.
Well, and I think one thing that has heightened that consciousness has been this psychedelic renaissance, which I think is an interesting way of packaging this. But the use of ketamine, of MDMA, of mushrooms, psilocybin, ayahuasca, all these different kind of plant medicines is starting to become more mainstream in our culture and society. I know in the mental health field, there is a lot of attention being paid to research and information about how these psychedelics are helping people.
Right.
But I think at the flip side of it, with so many people now accessing psychedelia, that the question of spirituality and consciousness and mindfulness has become a little bit more pronounced.
Yeah.
And so, all of this is coming together, and we thought, well, why not? Let's have a conversation about it. And so neither one of us are presenting ourselves as a particular expert.
Right.
We're coming from our own personal experiences on these things and our exposures to the different disciplines that we work with. And we're certainly not going to encourage anyone to commit any crimes, at least openly. No.
Right. Yeah. Because this is something that you don't want to just kind of jump into, but, do some research, talk to people, and engage in dialogue, engage your own curiosity, right? It's like, if you are curious about it, well, maybe sit down with some folks that can give you some good information, some, researched information about some of these things.
So it feels like in this conversation, there's a lot we can talk about.
Yeah.
And I think you and I, earlier before we started recording, suggested that maybe we need to kind of go back and do some foundational understanding, like some of the terms that we use around consciousness. Like, for instance, we always kick around this word medicine.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
What is that?
Penicillin? Or
I know, right? It's like, cough medicine.
Well, in the masculinity episode that aired last week, there's one of those fleeting thoughts. In that we were having this conversation about the constructs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of constructs because of our familiarity with a lot of these different things, that it also brings the language. Like, people who aren't part of the queer community sometimes don't always understand queer language or its meaning, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So anyways, we need to kind of go back and do that. And so maybe, think about what we did with Mindfully Gay, right? We started out with queer spirit.
Right.
And we recognized that the word or the concept of queer spirit carried with it connotation and triggers that weren't working very well.
Right.
And we switched over to Mindfully Gay, which I haven't heard any negative echoes on that.
No, I think people have opened their eyes a little bit more wide as a way of, more intrigued by it, and can step into it. It feels a little bit more inviting, I think.
Yeah. So maybe the way to start this is maybe focusing on like the yoga and the meditation and even some of the stuff we do with Body Sensual and what have you. Like, what is the mindfulness piece? What is some of the nomenclature that comes with your disciplines that would be helpful to understand?
Yes. And what comes to mind is how those elements personally have helped me. And it really intrigued me to, want to actually teach them and offer them to, the broader community. But coming back to that word medicine, when to think about like taking aspirin or taking a cough medicine or something, you want to feel better. You take medicine to feel better. And I think we can start with that very simple, definition of what medicine is or what it does. We take a medicine to feel better. And I think that, and it's actually something that I say quite a bit in my yoga classes and in my meditation, especially in my meditation work, and even with the sensuality work. We want to feel good. We want to feel better.
Say good again.
We want to feel good.
I felt it.
Right? But things are in the way. Our own thoughts, belief systems, aches and pains, physical stuff, things are in the way. And what I've discovered through practice and teaching, yoga especially, it allows us to tap into our bodies. We're moving in yoga. It's physical. A lot of yoga is physical, doing poses and things like that. Getting into our bodies. And think of your body for a moment like a stiff board, okay? But the pre-yoga body, let's say it's just a stiff board and you don't move very well. But as we get into some breathing, a little bit of movement, that stiff board isn't so stiff anymore. Oh, you've got some limber limbs and your joints feel good, your muscles are not as tight, you can move, you feel better. And what you've done is kind of broken or broke through something that was in the way, that tightness, that soreness, whatever that was kind of blocking your capacity to move well. And now you can. And I think that's what happened to me personally. Once I discovered yoga, I thought I was so limber, but when I started doing yoga, I realized, I'm not that limber. But it opened up something else in me as well. It allowed my mind to feel more clear. I can think better, more ideas were coming to mind, and it made me want to actually pursue those ideas and take action and do things and not just be that stiff board anymore. And I do the same thing with breath work and meditation. It's about sitting still, being quiet, and so you can be aware of, what are those obstacles? What are those brain things and triggers that just keep you trapped and stuck, right? So we're going to be aware of those things and use breathing and meditation, mindful meditation, to kind of push those things away outside of your body. And with continued practice, that actually happens. You're able to kind of clear your mind and start to step into what I would say your authenticity, your realness, your true self, and your ideas and thoughts just blossom, and you can move forward, and you feel good, you feel better. And that can be someone's medicine.
Mm.
Meditation can be someone's medicine. Yoga can be someone's medicine. It helps them to feel better. So that's how I would start to kind of talk about that integration.
Yeah. As you were talking, and I think I've brought this up with you before, maybe privately, maybe not on the podcast, but I've been having this kind of existential, philosophical kind of question, right? Because how many times do people show up to take yoga?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come to your yoga class because I want to be healthy and I want to make some healthy choices. And people will show up maybe 2 or 3 times and then you don't see them again.
Right.
Right. And I see this very frequently in the therapeutic office where people are showing up at a place of discontent and a disorganized way of existing in their life, which becomes very habitual, very, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And lately I've been having this question, and maybe I recognize that I'm on this threshold in my life where I'm switching into a different stage of life. And what I'm recognizing is that the stories of what worked in the past, as terms of how I show up in the world, doesn't work so well at this point in my life.
Right.
And there is this huge challenge of letting go of the past. Charles would say the dry bones, right? The old stories. And stepping into this new way of being. And one of my kind of existential questions, or kind of this ethical, philosophical question, is like, what is change? What is transformation? And is it appropriate for everyone? Like, if I don't even know how to make an example. If I've always shopped at Walmart, and Walmart has always kind of met my needs, is it appropriate to introduce me to Nordstrom's?
Right.
Would I be so far out of my element and unfamiliar? Could I make Nordstrom's my new norm?
Right.
And I sometimes think spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, behaviorally, right? What is it like? What is the challenge of stepping into the new way of existing and showing up? And if I get really mindful about things, right? If I use meditation and start to get connected to these pieces, does getting thrown into the place of the unfamiliar, what does that present? What are the challenges associated with that?
Right.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, because I see this all the time too in yoga. You probably see it in therapy, where, someone might be coming in crisis or at a critical moment where they need something, right? And they come to you. I get the same thing in yoga and in meditation too. Is like maybe something has been going on in their world, in their lives, and yoga just happens to be the thing that they step into and they try it. But it's more common than not that, I may see them once or twice and then they're kind of gone. My hope is that maybe they got something out of that and they're continuing with that thought or feeling and they can pursue that. Because I may never see them again. But to your point, I think yeah, I can speak for myself. I get very attached to my own stories. I'm set in my ways. I am
Mm-hmm.
so set in my ways. I'll, in, I'll, I'm intrigued by change, and but I may not always step into it because I think there is a fear that of losing what I have, or it's shifting so much that do I become a different person? And I don't know what that is. It's just full
Yeah.
of unknowns, just full of unknowns. Well, if I do this thing, like go to the Nordstroms rather than the Walmart, or do this yoga thing, or try this plant medicine thing, is it going to change me in a way where I won't recognize myself or I lose something? And that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Well, I was telling you earlier, I just came back from Peru and I feel like I want to reinvent myself professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I can see it and desire to make those changes, I have a lot of apprehension. Like, this works, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, in this conversation, that dynamic has to be considered. For instance, at the retreats, we're challenging folks to re-envision themselves as gay and transgender men. We're inviting them to revision themselves outside of the norms of clubs, porn, grinder, right? We're saying,
Yeah.
think of yourself outside of those templates.
Yes. Yes.
And consider this other potentiality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think they get a taste of it.
Yeah, they do.
And then it's like, ooh, but this is so much, if I hold on to this is familiar.
Yeah, it's familiar. It's easy. It's just
Yeah.
what we know. It's easy to fall back on what we know. But as you said, and I think it's very true, that, up to a certain point, those strategies, those belief systems and ways of doing things don't serve you anymore.
Yeah.
They don't work anymore. Just like, coping skills, right? Up to a certain point, you could probably get away with a lot of things, but after a certain point, those strategies just don't work.
There's this woman, her name is, I think it's Lisa Nichols. And I say this all the time too, but I'll blame her for this quote. But I will frequently ask clients, I'll say, okay, I get that this is how you're thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
How's that working for you?
Yeah.
If it's working just fine, do more of it.
Yeah, then fine.
But if it's not working, then we have to contemplate other potentialities. And I've had that experience.
Yeah.
I've talked about it on the podcast, meeting Nick as a nutritionist and a fitness coach. Right. When we first started working out together, I was thinking about this at the gym today. I was doing like 10 to 15 pull-ups. And I remember when I first started working out with him, I could barely get 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And today I was like, 10, 11.
Yes.
I'm like, bitch, I'm 60 fucking years old. Look at me.
Doing
right?
this. Look at me, right?
But it was interesting, his ability to kind of coach me through a process, which wasn't just about renovating my body, but it was reinventing how I did nutrition, reinventing how I did fitness, but also reinventing the stories I held about myself, about age, what I was capable of. And now the things I'm contemplating seem like way out there. And yet, because I've had some success, I'm deeply in the process of considering it.
Right.
So to me, when we talk about medicine, and I liked your analogy of saying it helps me to feel good
or better.
Body, mind, spirit.
Yeah.
Right. When I think of medicine, I think of practices and processes that invite me to alter at a cellular spiritual level the reality that I'm addicted to.
Yes. Yes.
And I think the fitness example is very vivid for me because it shows it happening in increments. It happened slowly and progressively in a way that it became a new integrated way of existing.
Yeah.
I think, I've been playing around with the Apple Fitness app, and when we were in Peru, that's what I did for fitness.
Good. All right.
And it was interesting because I did the first couple of workouts by myself, and then people started figuring out what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I'd have my little iPhone set up, and there'd be like 5 of us
I love it.
doing yoga around my iPhone.
I love it.
But what I recognized was that it has been movement and mobility has been such an important part of my new identity that I needed to do something to nurture that. It was a medicine, and it helped me to feel better. And when I did that in the morning, I went throughout the day feeling better about my body.
Yes.
When I think of medicine work in the spiritual context that I work in, which has been in these shamanic practices, I think about ritual, I think about processes that invite me to see myself through the lens of my ancestors, through the lens of the creator, through the lens of nature.
Right.
To kind of re-envision potentiality, to recognize that the reality that I'm connected to does not have to be the final word on my existence. And so I once heard a quote, and the paraphrased version of this quote is that we're never going to get into a desired state by holding on to the convenience of what we're currently doing.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
If I want to show up in the world in a particular way, healthy, happy, balanced, but I'm currently addicted and holding on to unhealthy patterns, I don't get to have both. I have to be willing to let go and exercise the true definition of faith, right? Is stepping into the unknown, trusting that I'm supported.
Yeah. You've nailed some very key things. And this last thing right there was support. Do you feel supported in this? In that endeavor of, leaving something behind, maybe leaving a part of yourself behind, letting it go, letting it die, really, so you can step into this new space. Like we said, that's scary. I'm getting chills now. That's scary. But it doesn't necessarily have to be scary or ominous, when you have support, when there's support. Friends, neighbors, whatever you might call your support. We can probably come back to that, but I think that's an important piece. But I want to touch on something you said earlier about getting in deep into the cellular structure of our habits and the things that we do. And because it does take that level of shakeup, I think, in order for us to really step into that newness, into something new. Because if someone's coming to yoga, for example, and they get a taste of it, or coming to a retreat, and they get a taste, and we are just kind of offering a little buffet of things. Try this, you might like this. And then we may not see them again. They're getting a taste. It's not getting to the cellular level when they're just getting a taste. It's very superficial. It's just kind of, let me just try this on.
It's a lotion.
It's just a lotion. It's just a shawl. It's a sweater. And then they might leave it behind, or forget about it. It doesn't quite fit, or whatever the analogy you want to use there, the image. What it takes, I think, is a level of consistency. You said practice. It is. Yoga is a practice. You don't become a pro. You don't become an expert. You're always a student. Even as a teacher, I'm always a student learning. I have a teaching practice. It takes consistency. You have to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. That's what taps into the cellular structure of the shift. Because, like you said, with your year-long plus transformation, it didn't happen overnight. You couldn't do those 12 pull-ups right away. It took time, but you kept coming back to the practice. I'm going to do this. I know it's hard, but I have support, and I'm going to do this. And you did. I think it's the same. It's the same with this. Going back to the medicine analogy, taking the cough medicine or the pill or something. It's not just taking a chewable or whatever and that you digest it and it's gone. Something's happening on a deep cellular hormonal level so that you feel better. It's the same thing with plant medicine, which really breaks through, right?
Yeah.
Or the consistency of working out or changing your diet, yoga, all those things.
Well, you just brought up plant medicine. Let's dive into that. Because it is a topic, it's interesting. I've been working with plant medicines for a long time.
A long time.
Over 20 years.
Yeah.
I would say it's closer to 25 years. In fact, we were working with plant medicine back when even when you went to Peru, you just didn't tell anyone because, right? And has been this layer of consciousness where everyone is now fully aware or conscious of psychedelics in the mental health field, right? Like here in the state of Utah, you can definitely access ketamine legally.
Yeah.
And I have some struggles with how we're looking at plant medicines. For instance, there is a huge political attention to legalizing psychedelics, which I support, but we feel like in order to legalize them, they have to be medicalized. I mean, they can only be used in therapeutic venues. They can only be used to treat depression or anxiety or PTSD. Yeah. And as a mental health therapist who's very much aware of the research and the data, there's very promising results coming out of the data about those medicines being used in those ways.
Right.
What I support is the idea that these medicines can be used in very powerful, sacramental, conscious, spirit-based levels of engagement.
Yes.
In fact, take mushrooms. Mushrooms have been so incredibly contemporized. But mushrooms for many indigenous communities, in Peru, for instance, the Incans, the Aztecs, and et cetera.
Right.
Native people in Mexico,
right.
the Maztec.
Right.
Mushrooms were used as sacred sacrament to understand the divine.
Yes.
And what I think is very interesting is these cultures that were using these medicines, just focusing on mushrooms for a minute, but true of the other indigenous, is it was a layer of consciousness, understanding that these medicines impacted body, mind, and spirit, and brought perspective to the holistic nature of existence.
Yes. Yeah.
That we were not separate from nature, that life did not exist at a hierarchy, but it was an interrelated web of existence. That my life was no more important or valued than the mouse.
Exactly.
Right? And so I think it's interesting that these communities that use these medicines had such a more holistic approach to living. And so my particular interest in these medicines is more about what they can do to elevate and upgrade my sense of living a better life, existing in a more holistic way, and finding balance and potentiality. And what I find with these medicines is they invite me to see myself outside of my addicted view of myself, which is usually not as how spirit sees me is very different than how I see myself.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so like when we went to Peru, we worked both with what's called huachuma, or the cactus San Pedro, which is a medicine I feel like definitely is a very contemplative, visionary kind of a tool. And then we work with ayahuasca, which comes from the jungle areas. And to me, ayahuasca is kind of a deep dive into the interpersonal psyche. And how a lot of these communities might look at mushrooms, peyote, ayahuasca, huachuma, ibogaine, right, is that these plants are identities, that they have a wisdom, that they have a knowledge, and that by partaking of them, you're bringing them into your body and inviting the wisdom of that plant to revision or to reimagine or to redefine your existence as you know it.
Yes. Yes.
Have you had that happen on the San Pedro?
Absolutely. And in the Western culture, because these things are becoming a little bit more modernized or contemporary, as you said, kind of in the mainstream, it worries me too. Like, can just anybody kind of get a certificate and now can do these things with their clients? And I cringe a little bit, because I think what they might be missing is what you just talked about. Just when you go to, deep into the culture of let's say Peru, because that's where I have been with you and worked with ayahuascarians or people who have knowledge of these plants and know the power of these medicines. It's not just a tea that you're drinking, but this is a soul, this is a being, this is knowledge, and is a direct connect to spirit and spirituality and all things. And they have that knowledge. Those who are, doing the ceremony with you and for you, they have and hold that knowledge. And part of their essence and presence is to teach that and to offer that and to share that. They are the doctors. They are the prescribers of these medicines. But I want to share, one of my first experiences. This is back in 2008, 2009, when I first went to Peru, and our teacher Ruben, who's been on the podcast, I remember him saying about the San Pedro is that this becomes part of your DNA. This becomes a part of you. There is a tea that you drink. Your body physiologically is going to do what it does with an intake or consumption of food or drink. Yet, you are taking in the essence of this medicine, this being, this knowledge, this direct line to spirit, and it becomes part of your DNA. And at first, I heard it, but I didn't really get it because I didn't feel that necessarily. And it really took a full year. And it was the second trip, having that in mind, that it becomes part of your DNA and you'll be able to access it whenever you need it. And it was the year later when we got to experience this again, that it was from then on that, yes, this is a part of me. It broke something open. It was deep in my cellular system. And I can, to this day, access that medicine. Yeah, the drink, the tea, it's gone, but the essence of it is still there, and I can access it.
Yeah. I tell people the plants, I think of them as master teachers. And so like when I go into a lodge, before I actually do the Swa Lodge, I will go in there and sit with the door closed and kind of meditate, offer tobacco. But what I find is that the state of existence that the Huachuma or San Pedro took me to, I can very quickly access. It's almost like the plant showed me how to get there.
Yeah.
And now I can just quietly go there in the grocery store.
Yes, exactly.
And I can show up with that layer of connectedness and consciousness because the plant showed me what was possible.
What was possible.
One thing I want to say about the plants that I think the medical world misses, right, is science is obsessed with trying to understand the DNA structural, microbiology of these things.
Sure.
And yet, I was telling you this shaman we worked with in Iquitos. We were talking about his journey as a shaman. He's 54 years old. His training started when he was 14. For many years, he never experienced the medicine. And then when he did, he was definitely kind of called into the business of working with the medicine. But for him to go into a ceremony, he goes on a special diet 2 weeks before he works with a group.
Wow.
That includes no sex, no certain foods that he won't eat, a certain way of existing. And I can tell you, in working in lots of different indigenous paths, whether it's sweat lodge or pipe or whatever, working the path of the medicine path, whatever that is, requires us to show up in the world in a particular way and to make certain sacrifices in order to make room for the power of that medicine to work through you as the shaman. You don't get that in your certificate training.
No.
But there's more to the plant medicines than just ingesting.
Correct.
There is a way of connecting ancestrally. It's a way of connecting with the spirits of the land, of the environment that you're working with. It's the understanding the power and the medicine of the songs, evoking the prayer.
Yes.
Now, I don't know when the last time you saw a doctor, but he didn't shake a rattle and he didn't sing a song to me. Right? And I'm pretty sure in most of our psychedelic clinics, there might be some nice music playing in the background.
right? On a CD.
Right? But you can't replace the power of having somebody who understands the indigenous technologies of those medicines present in the room, holding that space. And should you be challenged or have a difficult time, to know that that person can work with you, understanding that what's happening to you is more of a psychic, spiritual, emotional process that they're able to facilitate through their training, through their capacity to show up in a particular way. And that's where I feel a responsibility to be more vocal in my education and in my profession, is to challenge people who are running out to get certified. That I have never worked with a shaman who has spent less than 20 years developing their craft. Bruce and I have been doing it for 30, and I'm just now feeling like I'm able to step into that space.
I hear you.
And some of the people I do, but like the shaman that we worked with, he said he was 20 years into his process and still worked with his mentors.
Yeah, exactly.
But we live in a culture that, again, wants to know it and be the expert of it without the inconvenience of dedicating their lives to it.
Right. That's that consistency in a very simple way of saying that. That's the consistency, a devotion per se to the craft, to the practice. Whether it's you as the teacher or you as the student, show up. We always say that, show up. But in the showing up, maybe not just a taste or just kind of slip on the sweater and just try it on for size. And that's fine because it may not fit, But but if you're curious and want to maybe dive a little deeper and see what it really can do to unlock that potential, then there is a level of devotion and consistency and the willingness to shed, old stories, the dry bones, and step into that authenticity, that realness, or that, I just had the image of a snake and its skin, peeling the skin, the old skin, and you're anew, right? It's the same thing, or very similar. And with these types of, I was going to mention about not only the plant medicine or the tea that it's as far as the way that we ingest it, but you mentioned, the tobacco or the drumming or the rattling or the songs. They all too have their own essence.
Well, in Peru, right? You have whistling,
Yes,
bells,
mm-hmm.
the shakapa, which the sound of the placenta.
Yeah.
Right. But I think this is true of most of the cultures I've worked in. But I think in the Peruvian cultures, whether it's the jungle or the Andes, there is such attention given to shifting vibrational relationships, and that the agua florida water, for instance, or the bells, right, is about, here's where we're radiating frequency, right? And the bell then shifts it. The smell shifts it. And in the shifting then becomes the space of psychic liberation to then move a little bit and to kind of find like, oh, this is what's possible.
Yes.
And just to borrow from some of the academic literature, one of the reasons why psychedelia is becoming such a valuable tool in the treatment of trauma, right? When you think of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder,
right,
and when people are triggered, they go back and relive. They're kind of put back into the environment of the trauma psychologically,
right,
and they react as if it's happening.
Yes.
Psychedelia takes that person and kind of pulls them out of the situation so that they can now look at it objectively.
Yes.
And I kind of had that experience in my last ayahuasca journey.
Wow.
On this trip where I was examining my childhood as an observer. And the one thing that I didn't see when I was a child, and I haven't seen for most of my life, is I felt very insulated and isolated in the experiences that I was having and thought I was alone. And what I realized in this last ayahuasca journey is I started to recognize where people in my community, at my school, my friendships, people knew what was happening. And they were showing up in the way that they could at the time, in the context of what we were in. That I started to recognize places where people knew. And they were offering their version of a life preserver.
Yeah, right.
And I came out of that journey just kind of thinking, wow, I never realized that before.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we even look at our own potential, and I always kind of go back to this example, when you were at Lake Titicaca, I know that those experiences reshaped how you looked at yourself professionally. Because you saw something that was not evident before. And I think that is the power. And my argument, I think right now, in the world of plant medicine, everyone's running to a psychedelic experience and they're superimposing the concept of spirituality on that. And I'm glad that people are recognizing the need for spirituality. But there are lots of ways of accessing. I've seen people access that consciousness in a pipe ceremony or in a sweat lodge. When we worked with Melodoma, we did this whole thing with the being buried in the earth, which was remarkable. And there was no psychedelia involved in that. But there was sitting still. There was quietness. I know there have been times in yoga classes, I remember I used to do Bikram yoga. And what I noticed is that when I was really just focused on being in the moment, there was so much more that I could do than when I was worried about how other people were seeing me.
That's huge. And I want to kind of highlight that because like you said, it doesn't always have to be something that you have to ingest like mushrooms or something to get that psychedelic shift or change or whatever, to have that vision. But it could be something like a yoga class, because if you're consistent and keep coming to a class, you're going to hear, at least with the teachers that I've been working with for a number of years. I've been teaching yoga for 25 plus years. And what we are teaching people to do is exactly what you said. As you get into, your breathing, just aware of the breath, feeling your body in motion, attempting some of these poses, you're going to hear us say, and we're trying to get it into the deep cellular level, is be a witness. Be a witness to what you're doing rather than judging. Because it's very easy to, oh, they're doing that better than me. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I just feel more anxious when I try to do this breath work. I can't, all those things. I'm not going to be like that. We just get into our heads. That's normal. That's normal. The more that you do this, and the message that we are planting into you as we're practicing is, step outside of yourself, because that kind of happens, and just see yourself, be the witness of what you are doing, and just name it for what it is and not judge it. So instead of saying, oh, that's pain or that hurts, you might say, I'm having sensation. And it takes the judgment away. Mm-hmm. I'm having a feeling. I'm having a thought. I have a sensation. And it allows you to really have a new perspective on how you see yourself and how you approach things. Because if you're blocking your pathway with your own judgments, oh, I can't do that, or I'm not as good as them, or whatever, then you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, we'll try.
Right? Until you can be able to, all right, I'm just having this experience. That's just how I'm feeling right now. Okay, I'm okay with that. And it really, I think, opens the door for a lot of people. Yoga becomes not just this physical thing. It becomes a very emotional, thoughtful, and spiritual practice. It gets in there.
Yeah.
But it takes time. We start with the physical because that's what we know. I know my knees, I know my thighs, I'm tight, my hamstrings are tight. Okay, well let's work on that. Let's work on that. And then keep coming. Because I know for me, it took a good 6 months to a year of just practicing yoga before I realized, wait a minute, I'm seeing things a little bit differently. I'm not as judgy about things, or I don't get upset about things like I used to. I really saw a shift in my own temperament, and it made me like myself actually a little bit better. Like, oh, I can approach things a little bit more, with an ease and a calm. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a psychedelic per se, but your medicine might be something that just opens the door for you to have greater vision.
Yeah, what I like to think about in terms of all these spiritual tools, whether it's yoga, working out, meditation, ayahuasca, right? That just like these tools, there has to be balance, right? That I think the discipline is recognizing it's time to do a journey. It's time to do a lodge. It's time to get my body into the practice. So I feel like I want to shift this a little bit and bring it back into like the queer consciousness.
Yeah.
Because you and I are talking about there are tools available in our community, Mindfully Gay, right? That could be these explicit invitations for queer folk to see themselves beyond the archetype of martyr, victim, one paradigm that often makes me cringe is people wanting to say the only thing, being gay is only a part of who I am. Oh, bitch.
I used to say that. that.
Yeah. That's like saying being Black or being Italian is just part of who I
just
am.
part of who I am.
It's like, well, no, it really kind of infuses itself in an entire lens.
Yeah.
Right. And, if queer was purple, would we still be having that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think compartmentalizing our existence as being gay is just part of it. What it's saying is the only thing that's gay about me is what I do with my genitals.
Yeah.
As opposed to how I experience my world, engage it, is done through that lens.
Yes.
And the colonization of our folks, right? The religious narrative has been to create a lot of shame and sin around how we engage in our intimacy.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me, going back to some of the shamanic and cultural kind of practices, is a lot of these earth-based cultures, traditions, spiritual practices that I'm conscious of, and I know that's not just around shamanic practices. There is an invitation to view our sexuality, what we do sexually, as well as how we engage the world through that lens, as being magical. As being explicit medicine.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Recognizing, like, here in like the United States or this continent, before colonization, we didn't have the idea of sin. And so how people were engaging with each other and how they expressed themselves, right? In most indigenous ideas, wasting human existence was not an option. Everyone was incorporated in that wheel. And what I frequently see is that when queer folks begin to understand the holistic nature of their existence, their ability to show up as magical beings in 2024, 25 is powerful.
Very. Yes.
And magical.
And magical. And that's the thing, because I don't think queer people don't realize or never thought of that concept or that idea. It's like, what? Magical? What?
I'm thinking of the Body Central workshops that we've had.
Yeah.
Where I have seen some very magical things happen on those tables, right? That have this deep sensuality, which also had, remember that one workshop we did where we just had everyone come together and we're all naked and we're just holding hands and we just all kind of basked in that energy. And then we collectively drew it together.
Yes.
And we sent it out into the world to our loved ones.
Yes.
That was a physiological, psycho-spiritual process.
Yeah. I'm feeling it now. I mean, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And to witness that, to see that, and for them to experience that is just incredible. I can't really put words to it. But that's the power that we're talking about. That's the truth about our being, our essence. We've been taught in this this imposition of, we're only known for our sexual acts, and that's what you are, and it's been shamed and demeaned and all of that. And so we've taken that on. And so we just kind of accepted that as truth and just kind of live that way. And I hope, and I think you can resonate with this, like we're helping people to see something different, to open a few new doors and windows to the potential of not just that, it's all of this.
Well, think about the lodges. When we've done our retreats, when we did just the coming out lodge, right? Where all of us in that lodge are queer identified somewhere in the spectrum. We're collectively singing. We're collectively sharing. We're collectively praying. Now, I do a lot of lodges, but when I do those queer lodges, there is an energy that is so distinct and so different. I would say it's profoundly loving.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think people come out of those lodges shifted in some capacity, that they get a taste of their power.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what's this? Yeah.
Yeah.
And become even more curious.
You know, I love RuPaul. You know, and you know, I would love for our queer celebrities to kind of get beyond the fashionably acceptable versions of queerness and to really get into the intimacy of the magic and the intimacy of the power we have.
Yeah.
To, if you think about even culture in our, let's just pick our country. Right. And I once wrote this poem about this, but if you think about how we have contributed to the cultural texture of our existence, and what I would challenge is, if people can't recognize that, then just consider a world where those things don't exist. Where we don't have a Tennessee Williams, we don't have a William Shakespeare, we don't have the statue of David. We don't have Helen, right? Think about a world where our fashion impact, our sense of sensibility, even our morality, if it were gone, it would be a very gray existence.
Yeah, very gray.
That is our power.
Yep, absolutely.
And I would suggest it's only marginally tapped into.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
What happens when we fully step into it? Girl, we're going to redecorate Iowa. We're going to put some flowers in those cornfields. Right?
Oh, yes.
Think about how that power would show up in our families. See, instead of waiting for permission, what if we just showed up in that power?
Absolutely.
And what if we gave them permission?
Exactly.
Right? To me, and we started this out talking about medicine and mindfulness and consciousness, when we step into outside of our rigid restrictions, then we start to see what's possible. And it's not just about drag, right? It's about, I really believe that we have this capacity to heal, to transform the cultural narrative that has become so ugly. But we've only prioritized the voices that have money, we all have this power, this influence in our own spheres of existence.
We do. And that's, going back to, we are the medicine.
Yes.
We have it. It's in there. It's just being able to unlock it, release it, recognize it, and to be able to, put it out there, as you said. And we have Mindfully Gay. That this is just one of many kind of platforms as far as resources that people could potentially tap into to find what your medicine is. Yeah, we have yoga, nutrition, the shamanic work. That's just a piece. That's just one or several ways, 3 ways that you can start to tap in. There's a lot of ways out there. Maybe it is drag for you. Maybe it is singing for you. Maybe it's something. It's what's your power, and step into it fully, because it is transformational, not only for yourself but for existence around you.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think we've touched on a lot of different things here. Hopefully it's something that's contemplative for folks. I want to put this out there too. I'm thinking about folks who may think, oh, I'm not really into spirituality, or I'm not really, right? And I think spirituality gets a bad rap because of religion. But I think anyone who's seeking a path of authenticity is also going to be engaging in a process of mindfulness and consciousness. That doesn't have to be in relationship to any deity or any particular,
Right.
It's simply an invitation to imaginatively examine your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have the courage to step into your ambitions.
There it is. Yeah. Love that. And if you are curious, and this is sparking something in your brain and your heart, and you happen to be, let's say if you are in Salt Lake City and you're in this area, try this out. Practice. Try it on. Come to one of our events. Come to a lodge. Come to a pipe. Come to a retreat. If you're outside of this space, what are the resources around you that you can, look into to help you discover your own potential? Look into it. We really encourage that. I think that's kind of our mission. And, we've been talking about, kind of continuing to grow personally, but to grow this space and have a space so that we can continue to do this work and invite people in to not only just try it on for size, but maybe experience this as their path towards transformation. So that really kind of wraps up this episode, but to give it some good thought, we encourage you to, try out some of our events, keep listening to the podcast. If you're new to the podcast, there's a lot of episodes behind this one that you might be interested in. So take a look. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can watch us live. If you happen to be watching us live, we're on YouTube. But if you're just listening, it's Spotify and Apple Podcasts and in other systems. And you can always reach out to us too. We're on Facebook at the Mindfully Gay Guys, on Instagram at mindfully_gay. So you can find us there. And we really want to help you on your journey. That's what I think our mission, our calling is part of our personal power. We want to step into that.
Well, and I'm just going to add to this.
Please.
Just came back from Peru, and we were just talking, really revisiting how we approach Mindfully Gay, right? And so now's a really good time for people to contact us with their ideas or their request, because we're at this process redefining, re-examining how we're going to approach this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Mindfully Gay podcast.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes, where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.